You're listening in on an animated discussion about Batman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from thecinematropolis.com. And today we'll be discussing Season 2, Episode 20, Batgirl Returns, a.k.a. the final episode of the original art direction for the show. So this is the last episode that looks like Batman the Animated Series as we've known it up to this point. Now, Joshua, I am very thrilled that we once again have none other than Cinematic Schematic co-host, host of Soundtrack, Alexandra Bohannon with us today.
Hi, I've returned.
Much like Batgirl.
Yes, exactly.
That's right.
I hope my presence is a little more uplifting and interesting and brings you much more joy than this episode brought me.
Yeah, I think that's a good hope.
I think so.
That's also almost guaranteed.
Yay!
And both because you are delightful and because the bar of interesting is set very low by Batgirl Returns.
Yeah. Also, I just want to point out you've been featured on an animated discussion more than Batgirl was featured in Batman the Animated Series up until this
drop
point.
that mic!
Oh my God.
Because what is the second episode with her?
That is an indictment.
Third if you count the two-parter.
Yeah.
Ow!
An indictment, I say, upon your original creators. However, it is a problem that they fix after this episode.
They're using this episode. That's the one thing about. Well, we'll get to it.
So, okay, yes, I don't want to get too far ahead. Let me talk about this title card. That's my bag. I want to talk about the title card because I do think that this title card is a thesis statement for the entire episode. In that, I like it fine. It's actually very attractive in what it's trying to do. But what it's doing does not wind up being that interesting. And I really feel like that's true for this entire 22 minutes. What do you guys think?
I like the title card more than I like the episode.
Oof.
I think I like the moon. The shot of Batgirl in front of the moon. That's just really cool.
No, it's very attractive. It's doing a thing.
Yes.
I would hang this on my wall.
Correct.
Other than Batgirl is in this episode, it doesn't really tell us anything about the episode.
I think it doesn't really tell us much about the episode at all, other than that she's back, which is in the title.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, beautiful, good colors, good use of shading. I mean, I'm a sucker for like anything that looks as like using the blues on contrast with the blacks, and all the colors look really great together. It's just, It isn't exceptional. I think it is better than this episode.
Yeah.
It isn't exceptional should be the subtitle for Batgirl Returns.
Yeah.
So it's, the episode's okay. I don't really think, it doesn't really tell us much about Batgirl other than that she's back. Like, we don't really learn any more about her. Well, actually, that's not true. We learn a little bit about her. There's some stuff with the Batman dream sequence where she dreams about fighting crime and maybe having a little something for Batman, which is I didn't realize that this was planted as early as this episode in the DCAU, but that is a thing that we're going to talk about that develops into bigger things down the road.
Absolutely. Sometimes in good ways and sometimes in less impressive ways.
Agreed.
So I think that in addition to the title card being kind of a thesis for this episode, I feel like the episode itself is kind of our summation for a thesis we've been working under for the last, half dozen episodes, which is we're towards the end of BTAS's run. The creators either knew that was the case because they were starting to work on Superman, or the writing was on the wall, or they were just getting a little bit bored because Batman is 100% absent from this episode, and Bruce Wayne is 99% absent
in the last episode of this original art direction.
I feel like the episode tells us more about the writers, the backstage drama, or that is or isn't there. It tells us more about that than it does about furthering Batgirl as a character, or Robin, or even Catwoman. Like, yes. I feel like it furthers like them saying, yes, well, you know what, a great way to send off a show about Batman, not have Batman in this episode.
Now, we talked about the 90s. We're not expecting a finale.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's fair. We're not expecting a finale, but this is so ending with a whimper as far as being a Batman show.
Wasn't the Worryman the end of the last season? It was something like there was like a I don't want to put the weight of a season finale on this episode.
Absolutely.
Because, again, 90s animation, in the same way I think we've talked about how there's really not a lot of continuity. They're starting to lay the track for more continuity, specifically in the last season of Batman the Animated Series.
That's true.
But I mean,
Again,
it's still
to greater or lesser return on that investment. But yeah, they're trying.
Exactly. They're getting there. But this is still very much you have 2-parters. It resets every episode. And for animated shows like this, the season finales really weren't a big climactic thing. It was just all right, and that's the last episode. It's the last episode of our 13 episode order or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I agree with that. They at least could have seen it coming, though, that they had even if it's just a mediocre Batman story, let it end on a mediocre Batman story if you know that this is wrapping this season. It doesn't need to have like you said, I mean, the times kind of constricted us from having big holy kind of season finales, but
well, I mean, I just think back to, and this is something we'll touch on again in the future, but Batman Beyond, for example, ends with a pretty straightforward episode.
Right.
And that's the series finale of that show. I mean, eventually through Justice League, they do come back and they put a cap on that series 5+ years later. But I mean,
but that I would forgive, right? Here with that, I could understand and it'd be fine. As Alexandra is saying, if it were a solid C Batman episode, but it's not a Batman episode at all. And none of the 3, frankly, underserved characters that get to star in this episode because he's gone are well served by it.
Nope,
no,
They're not
they are
underserved.
not.
They're there.
I'm whelmed by them.
They're going they're going through the motions, right?
Yeah.
It definitely feels a going through the motions kind of episode.
And all of these triumvirate could have been incredibly interesting relationships, right?
Dude, Batgirl, Catwoman, and Robin starring in an episode. That's a recipe right there, and I think it's a tasty recipe. If I do say so myself, the ingredients just weren't quite up to par.
Here we are at the end of BTAS. This is it. This is the end of Batman the Animated Series. We have a lot more DC Animated Universe to talk about, but here we are at the end of it, and I feel finally we are talking about an episode that I can say is the perfect example of why we decided at the beginning to not do every single episode of Batman the Animated Series.
Yep.
This is a good episode. It's fine, but it's not exceptional. And if we had covered every single BTAS episode that we could describe that way, we would have A, talking about a lot more of them, but B, our discussions would have been a lot more boring.
Yeah, we would have had a lot more like this, these conversations where I don't really know what to say. Our whole conversation with this episode is okay, this happened, and we're only talking about it because it's the last episode of the series, right?
I think we might have talked about it if it were in the middle of the season because of Batgirl, maybe because she's overall underserved. But even then, we'd be talking about missed opportunities, right? Because Catwoman and Batgirl teaming up could have been very rich. Yes. Catwoman, who is textually romantically interested in Batman, teaming up with Batgirl, who is now textually romantically interested in Batman, is another way that it could have been very rich. There's a lot of ways this could have gone that would have been. And when I say that could have been more interesting, it sounds like I didn't like this episode. I liked it fine, but that's it. I liked it fine.
It was so fine that I can't really remember a lot of distinct moments about it. The things that
my notes are very sparse. I'm with you.
Yeah.
It's a run-of-the-mill episode. And run-of-the-mill of a good show is still pretty good, right?
Yeah. Some of the parts that I do find interesting to talk about, because unfortunately an on-paper Batgirl Catwoman dynamic did not pay off on the screen at all. Really. Unfortunately, I wish I could say, oh yes, there's so interesting, meaty things going on. There are not, I don't feel. The thing that I found really interesting, Robin, in talking to Batgirl.
Yes.
Not a fan of how he talked to Batgirl.
Nope.
That hurt. It hurt my feelings as a female viewer of this show.
Oh, well, so we were watching this at the same time, and there was one line in particular he says at the end where he's you've had a hard day. At the very end where and I just saw your reaction. You're just ooh.
Now that is not good.
Yeah.
Okay. But I feel like that line could have been entertaining if they had been less adversarial at the beginning. But Robin really comes out of the worst of the Batman interpersonal playbook, which when they make Batman a real jerk on this show, it's bad. It does not work, especially when they make him a real jerk to Robin.
I mean, it works. It just doesn't work in a way that you want to watch.
And it is often undermined within the actual episode itself, right? Like it does work to create the sort of conflict. But I mean, he sounds like he is saying Batman's lines to Batgirl.
Right.
That Batman would say to him as Robin. And that betrays a lack of self-awareness that I feel is very inconsistent with Dick Grayson,
but
like as a larger character.
Okay. But I'll posit this question for you. Maybe as a larger character, yes, a character in this show.
He's barely a character in the show.
Well, I'm saying
so
because
you're right.
Because I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying that the way this character turns out, like him saying like vaguely, like not sexist is a strong word, but he doesn't think super highly of women. That's pretty consistent with things he said on the show, like in previous episodes.
That's true. That's not.
It's not good.
Not untrue.
I'm not saying it's good, and I don't know. It probably wasn't intentional. I'm sure there's a lack of awareness there, but it's
well, there's also the fact that we've barely had any Robin, right?
Yeah. It's true, but I would say I feel like at least one thing you and I have talked about frequently, and maybe we don't 100% agree, is I think I'm okay with getting like kind of the rougher edges of Batman because I think we also see the good sides of Batman, like when you talk about with the Harley's Holiday, where you see kind of the compassionate side.
He doesn't have to be perfect, right? Like he can be a complicated character who's not always right all the time.
And but with Robin, specifically with Dick Grayson, that's not a healthy relationship on this show,
and it should be
probably.
I mean, I think broadly for Batman as a concept. Overall, it should be. And the show itself seems to want us to treat it like it is, except for...
Oh, it's not. But then here's where I'm...
Except when they're fomenting the conflict.
It just makes me really wonder, and I know this is touching on a larger conversation we'll get to. How much of that is intentional? Because there are times where I'm like, oh, very clearly they are trying to posit tension between Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne and Batman and that Robin. But then there's other times like this episode where, he's like basically reciting Batman in a really kind of like vaguely sexist way where you're like, this is not flattering.
Yeah.
But you like, yes, Batman would say this, but Batman says this to Robin, which is not sexist because they're both men, but he's talking down to Robin. But then he takes it and passes that along to Batgirl.
It is,
and it's not good.
Tell me what you think, Alexandra, because you're on to something else here, which when Batman talks down to Robin at the point that Robin is 18, 19, 20 years old, it's not a good look.
No.
But we can understand it. He has been his father figure for at least 5 or 6 years and has been his mentor in crime fighting for a similar amount of time, right? They are not peers.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we should be moving to a place where they are peers, right? But we've also talked about how that can be a difficult transition for a father, right? The flip of this, though, is Robin and Batgirl are
peers.
Are peers. Or 100%.
And if they are not peers in any way, it's inexperience. And when Batman was not a peer with Robin in experience, he taught him things. Bruce Wayne taught Dick Grayson things. And it does. With the changing context, it really feels like Dick is almost challenged by her existence in a way that makes it sexist, right?
Yeah.
Like he's more challenged by the fact that she's a woman than that she exists at all.
Right.
In the broader context of how Batman treated Robin we never get to see that on this show, but we have to assume he taught him stuff.
Well, it just feels like to me, it seems like, and again, this is, I'm just very curious about how much of this was intentional from the get-go, because we've talked about that tension. And the way that Dick Grayson is talked to like Batman, and he feels like he's got more experience than her. I don't think it's intentionally sexist, but it comes across as very sexist.
That's what I was saying. And then with the contrast with his relationship with Batman.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's like maybe he's not a sexist, but what he's saying kind of manifests itself in a very sexist way.
Right.
And then on top of that, but that's the thing, it's a part of his ongoing arc, because him and Batman, of course, we're at the end of the original run.
Yeah.
The next time we see him, he's Nightwing, and he's broken off and done his own thing because he wants to be peers with Batman.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I don't know. I don't think, I'll put it this way. I think it's consistent whether or not you like it. I think it's another story. I think it's very okay to not like it, but I feel like so far up to this point, I'm like, they've been consistent with Dick. It's just, it's not good. It doesn't look good. It makes him look kind of like a jerk. And unfortunately, I think that's even in the redesign, he's still kind of a jerk. And that's unfortunate.
I mean, I would believe that Robin is a jerk. Like, I mean, I haven't not seen the episodes with him. I mean, the last episode I saw for this podcast was the Riddler episode, in which Robin is like playing like the computer game maze thing, and that was the last thing. And in that
very
episode,
kind of infantilized in that episode too. Like
very
he's very much
so.
the kid, not an 18, 19, 20-year-old.
Right. And then so you fast forward to my next brush with this Robin is this episode. I believe that it is consistent. I don't particularly like it because I also don't think it's intentional. That's my thing. I don't actually think it's intentional.
That's okay. So you don't think it's intentional?
I don't think it's intentional.
I don't think the sexism is intentional.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah, but
The condescension is.
Yes.
And the context makes it a lot worse than it necessarily
Yeah.
could have been, should have been, or what.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the writers thought about it that way in any way.
No.
A bunch of dudes sitting around, I don't think they thought about it that way.
Probably not.
I believe that it was intentional for Robin to be a jerk. I don't believe it was. I think it was more of an idea of like if Robin was dealing with another Robin of the same age and whatever, I think he would have still been that aggressive, that much of a bad word, all of these things. Like I think all of that would have been
even more of a Richard.
Yeah.
Even more of a Richard.
I fixed it.
Good. Yeah. I would have think that would all be the same, but with the added thing of like
The gender difference. Like puts a magnifying glass on it in a way. That's
not
terrible,
flattering.
But almost certainly unintentional.
For
because
sure.
A room full of dudes mid-90s.
Yeah.
I will say, because this is another thing that this episode does, is starts to lay the track for what the show is going to be after the redesign. Okay. And after the redesign, Batgirl is much more prominent, and that is good.
Yes.
Like I'm a big fan of that. She is one of the characters that comes out of the redesign much improved. Batman's attitude towards all other human beings is not a thing that comes out improved after the redesign. And it's kind of interesting that their last episode has Robin being such a Richard.
Yes.
In a way that they go hard for and double down on with Bruce Wayne
Right.
post redesign. And frankly, you're not wrong for Dick also.
Well, because I think I'm interested to get into the redesign territory because of that, because I don't remember him being that much of a jerk, but obviously I know Batman. Obviously that's a thing.
Yeah.
Because we see how this ties into Batman Beyond and Justice
and I
League.
mentioned that the comics at the time were very much Batman is a jerk who is barely getting along with his Justice League peers and is at odds with most of his proteges.
At
the time.
I will admit I kind of like it when he's at odds with the Justice League. Less so the Bat family, though.
Yeah. Well,
because like solidarity.
If it's part of an arc, sure. Right? Like if there's a rocky transition when Dick gives up being Robin and becomes Nightwing and they don't quite know how to. I've said this before. I have a preteen child. But I can see this writing on the wall. Like our relationship changes as he evolves, right? And that I'm not always as comfortable or as smooth as I'd like to be on that transition. And I can imagine that the transition to adulthood for my son will be one of the more difficult ones. Like I see all that. Sort of the problem with these characters that are sort of static, sort of not. Is that you wind up stuck in this place for so long that it's gross. Well, and I think that's part of, but not the only thing, because we're going to talk about how he treats the new Robin.
And I think in
the redesign.
I
hate to jump ahead, but I don't want to jump liminal space.
And this is where I'm headcanoning it, and I'm very interested. I have headcanoned it in my memory. And I'm interested to revisit the new redesign because I want to say, at least the way I remember it, is he tries to like take lessons he learned for how he treated Dick and do differently with the new Robin.
I disagree with this characterization.
But
that's for
I have not watched. But I haven't watched those in a while. So in my head canon, that's how it works. But I don't necessarily think that's. I'm interested to see how that holds up.
So isn't it fascinating in a meta level how much weight this episode gets as a liminal space between BTAS and between the New Adventures redesign? Mm-hmm. Like we see some of this track laid, like Batgirl, right? And we see some of this track laid in ways we wish it maybe we wish it wasn't, or it gets laid in a way that is stronger
even
than
the dream sequence again. That's a larger conversation, but this is a seed that's planted. Again, I was surprised by how early it shows up, and her second
romantic
appearance.
interest
and Batman.
Bruce becomes a thing through the redesign and a much bigger thing sort of in the backstory of Batman Beyond.
Yeah.
And here it is, like, laid out again in this kind of weird liminal space.
Do you want to hear? This is just I know I don't know how intentional this is, but you guys be the judge.
Yeah.
Robin, this is a side note on a line, but Robin says something along the lines of, "What are you, a fortune teller or something?" And then Barbara Gordon ends up being Oracle.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how much of that was you guys being cute?
Wow.
Was she Oracle by that point in the comics?
Yes,
Okay. All right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She was actually, without going too far down the rabbit trail, she was
Yeah.
Oracle for not the Bat family originally.
Okay.
She became Oracle in Suicide Squad.
That's right. That's right.
And then got adopted, like readopted back into the Bat family as Oracle, but was definitely by the mid 90s. Yeah, she's 100% the voice in their ears. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And awesome.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty. I was like, are you guys just being cute with that? You know, kind of
That's
a
delightful.
little moment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to kind of wind down and putting a pin on the conversation, I think it's really important that we talked about this episode because I think we're right. We're all like, this is kind of a meh episode, but clearly there are things here that you're like,
You have to see it. It's
The weight of
planting
history, right?
seed.
Like what we know about the DCAU as it progresses gives this episode more weight than A, it deserves, and B, than it can support, frankly. So that's why, yeah, you're stuck. It's another one kind of like Deep Freeze, where I will say you have to watch it, but you're going to grit your teeth a little bit. It's
Yeah.
not great. It's not going
Yeah.
to blow your mind, but it's part of the bigger picture.
Yeah,
Right.
Whereas Deep Freeze had a DA plot, and then the Freeze stuff was A++. This was average by almost every count.
Yes.
Yeah.
Average on all metrics.
Yeah,
Yes.
like it is as a whole, some of its parts completely average. And I wish there was even, okay, another interesting thing I like to say, the dynamic, seeing the changes in dynamic from, okay, you have Batgirl, quote, working with Robin, and that's an adversarial relationship, but it is the Bat family. And then you have her working with Catwoman, which on paper should be adversarial, but they're like working really well together.
Yeah.
And Catwoman is kind of showing her the ropes in a way that is really interesting, because a common thing that we tend to get, and which we also see in Harley's Holiday, is that even on paper, an adversarial relationship, like women kind of form bonds that
sure,
kind of
yeah.
subvert what everyone's on paper roles should be.
Yeah,
And even if
yeah.
Catwoman does try and actually steal the Jade statue at the end of it, like,
Because at the end of the day, in a lot of ways, real world
Yeah.
as well as fictional, it's women against everybody.
Yeah.
Even if we don't necessarily get, I'm saying we, like the royal we. I am not. It's women against the world,
Right.
because the world is against women. So
Yeah.
even if two women don't necessarily like each other, they will be like team up against.
yeah.
dude, all
And
the
so
dudes,
the
slings
funny,
and arrows.
the patriarchy.
the
there you
fun
go.
Yeah, yeah.
idea that it's like Dick Grayson is like should be on paper on her side, and is not,
But
out of
he's
this
totally the
slick thing
patriarchy
of
personification.
yeah competition. It's kind of a weird place to put this episode. Like, I don't know, it's strange. I mean, I think the dynamic between Batgirl and Catwoman could have been a lot better, but I think the little slivers that we got were
It felt phoned in and still worked well enough.
exactly.
Yeah, which tells you, I mean, again, kind of like the slight tweaks we would do to Deep Freeze. Well, substituting the big villain is not a slight tweak, but you know what I'm saying.
I feel like
He's so not inconsequential. It's a slight tweak.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. Like, if this episode had been about Robin being a jerk, and because at this point, Batgirl is an outsider looking in. She's not in the club. She doesn't know anybody's secret identity. She was given one batarang at the end of her last appearance. You know what I mean? Like, she's not in the family yet. And if Robin's being standoffish about it, and Catwoman is going to show her the ropes of how to be a vigilante or anti-hero in
Robin's
Gotham.
actually threatened by her.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
If they'd done some of this on purpose,
Like,
I might
leaned
not
into
like
it.
what happened to Dick's character.
They should have leaned into it
but
more.
the episode would have been 100% better.
Yeah. Made it more about these kind of interpersonal dynamics versus like just
Whatever
silly,
was actually going on.
silly stuff that, I mean, it's not even silly. It's just mundane things.
I think it's probably time to wrap up the episode. Do we? I don't have any alternate media recommendations. Do you guys have any? Because I feel like this episode is kind of, it happened. I don't feel strongly enough to make. Nothing came to mind.
literally the biggest indictment that I can make of this episode is that it does not make me think of similar stories.
Yes.
It's so mainstream, mainline superhero that it just doesn't make me think bigger thoughts. And I feel like now this conversation we've had, I feel like if I walked away from the mic and we chatted about it, we could come back with some. But even that would be based upon what
the conversation
want this episode to be, not what the episode actually is.
Correct.
So it's a weird place for us to kind of sort of end it, but I think it's appropriate for the episode that we just don't have Rex.
Yeah, I don't have any.
Zero.
Sub-Zero, you could say.
Well, that about wraps up this animated discussion. Caleb, where can people go to continue the conversation with you?
Well, Joshua, you can always find me on Twitter talking about film, television, video games, and all sorts of other pop culture goodness at C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. I'm also the editor-in-chief and film critic at the Cinematropolis, and we publish these in-depth essays on all types of different films, oftentimes including science fiction and superhero films, all the stuff you'd want to read about. And you can find all these articles at thecinematropolis.com. Joshua, what about you?
I'm also most active on Twitter, where you can find me easily enough at Joshua Unruh. And remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions.
Which leads me to what we're going to talk about in our next episode. We'll be closing out our discussion of Season 2 of Batman the Animated Series with an in-depth look at the second Batman movie, Batman Sub-Zero.
Until next time, we'll see you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel.